I assumed, I think like a lot of people probably do, that it would be very straightforward. I offer to buy your business, bank gives me money, I buy your business, everything's fine. That's not how it went.
Welcome to Business Buying for Financial Independence. I'm Tim Delaney, and I help young professionals buy small businesses so they can escape the 9 to 5 and take control of their time, income, and future. If that sounds like you, hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Today's guest is my first repeat guest, Jimmy Feeman. Jimmy is a Forbes 30 Under 30 recipient and an entrepreneur who launched No Baked at just 23 years old and turned it into a nationally recognized dessert brand. He's run e-commerce, scoop shops, franchised the concept, and even explored the world of consumer packaged goods, which we discussed on his last episode, episode 2. Now he has just closed on a subcontracting business that we are excited to hear about today. So, Jimmy, welcome back to Business Buying for Fi.
Thanks for having me back, Tim. It's cool that I was episode number 2. I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. You were actually my first guest interview released. So I had, I'd batched a whole bunch before I publicly released the podcasts, and I don't think you were my first interview that I actually recorded, but you were the first interview episode I released. My episode 1 was just a little introduction of myself. So you were the first guest, and now you're the first repeat guest, and the
Let's
first
go.
guest that went from looking to buy a business to buying a business, and back on the show.
Yeah. I know I think when we first met, I was very I was hesitant. I was also really excited to kind of like dive into like, can I actually make this happen? And it was a very unexpected journey because I assumed, I think like a lot of people probably do, that it would be very straightforward. I offer to buy your business, bank gives me money, I buy your business, everything's fine. That's not how it went.
I just got off a phone call with somebody else that talking about that exact thing. It's he's been looking for 2 years and hoping to close soon, but it's a roller coaster ride, right?
It's definitely a roller coaster ride. And I think the thing that struck me as kind of shocking, I got a really, really good deal on just the multiple that we bought the business at. Um, it was doing really, really well. Um, and the more we got into it in the very beginning, so I got an LOI out to the owner. He was pumped. Um, I came in a little over asking because I was going to ask him to do a little seller financing. And I knew like the SBA rules, like, hey, I get him to defer some of the seller financing that counts as equity. They've changed up the rules. They changed them up while we were doing the transaction again. Um, but that remained a true fact. And so we only had to come up with 5% down payment. And I figured like, oh, this is a like done deal. A bank will underwrite this. And we ended up going to like 8 different banks for someone to be interested. And I was like, this is so interesting that nobody wants to underwrite this deal. Um, like the debt service really ends up being about a third of what they were making, maybe a little less. And so like it seemed like a slam dunk, but apparently not. And the biggest hurdle that came up, and this is just funny for me, was like, well, you don't have enough industry experience. And I was like, but I have a lot of experience in general. Can you please take that and do whatever you will? And they also had a really great key employee who's still there. I'm actually about to promote him. We originally, when we started doing the acquisition, Logan, who's like the guy who was running things for Brock, I actually looked at him and I was like, why are you not buying it? And he's 26 and he was like, I just don't think I'm ready. But I'll gladly run things for you if you do buy it. And I was like, I'll take you up on that. And then I ended up bringing in another business partner into the deal. So it's 50-50 me and him. And Logan, I was like, I don't need you to like come off the job site and do all the things I thought I needed you to do. And that was kind of the assumption for the first month. And now after a month of having the business, I've realized that that's kind of just not true. Like I would rather have him off the job site faster, doing a few of the things that like I'm just not comfortable doing. And I think it's been interesting for me to get inside someone else's head. The owner had a lot of things in his head, not written down, and realized that, oh, I am the same way. So, like, if you look at No Baked Cookie Dough, we try to document as much as we can. We are a franchise system, so we have to. But there are a lot of things still that are just kind of like tribal knowledge. And the thing that's been the most complicated, and this is maybe this won't shock you, but like it's literally been figuring out how to send invoices to the right people. So like I have access to their QuickBooks still, and I have access to my QuickBooks for the new entity. And I've been trying to just like take the jobs I know we've been doing, get them out of the old QuickBooks, put them in the new one. And sometimes the jobs don't exist in the old QuickBooks. And I'm like, but someone just cited that house. Who are we charging for this? Who owns the house? I don't even know who owns it. And I'll end up calling Logan and being like, hey man, like so like this house here, like this address, like who's the builder? And he'll be like, oh yeah, that's like this one. Like we work with a couple different like GCs and builders who exclusively use us on their new homes. And we put on siding, roofs, gutters, occasionally like some other stuff, but it's mostly siding, roof. And like our subcontractor for roofing sent me an invoice today because he was like, yeah, so like usually we get paid on the 15th. Awesome, I'll pay you. I haven't been paid for any of these jobs that you're asking me to pay you for because I didn't even know they existed. So the transition period has been a little more shaky than I wish it would have been, but I know I easily get better. We immediately implemented some like project management systems to at least like track the jobs that are happening and link that to QuickBooks. Um, but even like getting through this transitionary period, I'm like, oh, this is just so annoying because somebody knows that somebody isn't me, and I don't really know who to ask. It has been great though because the old owner is still working out of the same office as us. We're all still kind of in there together every day. Um, and he's going to stick around pretty involved for the next 3 months. So it's not a clean break. I still have access to all the people I need to have access to, but man, it has been so much more complicated than I thought it would be. I thought it would be simple, easy. We bill people, they pay us. No.
No, no, things are never as simple as they seem. That's one thing I've learned through my time in business. A ton of stuff to unpack there. I want to just start by backing up a little bit and explain to the listeners how you came about this business. What was it about, or how'd you find it, and what was it about this particular business that made you send the LOI?
Yeah. So as you know, like I'd looked at many other businesses before as far as acquisitions, most of them in this food space. So things that I was familiar with. And then I had a little midlife crisis last year when we moved to Montana. I was like, I don't want to do things that I don't want to do anymore. And then the second rule that I kind of came up with for myself was I don't want to do another working capital heavy business. So something that holds a lot of inventory. Um, I think when you had, I exclude restaurants and retail from that because so for like all of our scoop shops or anyone that I know that has a retail store, inventory stays flat. Like it doesn't fluctuate very much, and there's not accounts receivable. So it's not this like constant cash strain or this thing that could, in theory, implode and destroy you. And so we dealt with that with No Baked, and it's part of why we shut the plant down that we were running, and then we started shifting into franchising. I think when I first came on your podcast, we were starting to franchise again.
Mhm.
Since then, we've sold. It will be 4 franchises. Let's just keep our fingers crossed about that. Um, and they're opening all over the country. Really excited. But franchising, running our scoop shop, doing e-commerce, none of those things are necessarily like working capital heavy. The cash cycle is really fast. It's really important to me. So when I was looking for a business to buy, especially once I'd moved here, I wanted to rethink what is it that I actually want to accomplish. And I wanted diversification away from food. I also wanted something that was mostly a service business. So we're providing a service to somebody, they're paying us for it. There's no inventory, there's rarely inventory. It turns out in this business, there is inventory. It just generally gets paid for pretty quickly, and it's not on every job. So, like any of the new home builds that we do, the GC provides all the materials. If we decide to, and they currently do like a very, very small amount of it, if we decide to do direct to consumer, then that becomes a very different story. Like you have to bring the siding to the job and do the whole thing. So that's been something we've thought about and we're considering. It's definitely something I'll do to drive growth. Um, but we're going about it in a way where we can find something that will help the homeowner either finance it or be like, hey, can you give us a 50% deposit before we start? Just to balance the cash cycle. So, anyways, full circle, I wanted something that was not no baked, so not food, and I wanted something that had a very small cash cycle. So, can we have a business that actually makes money?
Yeah, it's good for those of you listening out there. If you're not familiar with like the capital that it takes to hold inventory, it can be a huge drain on a business, especially if you're trying to grow. Jimmy's right. For the most part, a lot of retail, once they reach a certain point, we're not adding or increasing our inventory to a level where it's going to be a cash drain because we're not getting in enough cash. And so for this type of business, if you're just going to do jobs and showing up and the inventory is there, you don't have to pay for it. It's not your cost, and you get paid when the job's done. It's pretty quick cash, like a retail store or a scoop shop where the customers are not leaving until they've paid, typically, which is great for us as business owners. We get the cash very quickly in a couple days with the credit cards. But
Yeah, and it makes things a lot easier to
yeah,
deal with.
yeah, yep. Cash is king, and having cash in your bank account as a business owner is very important. So you identified, you narrowed in on your type of business pretty well. How did this particular subcontracting business come about?
Well, I started searching a lot of marketplaces and also signed up for a lot of newsletters. And then once I got to Bozeman last year, I started just trying to network with as many other like business owners as I could. Um, I actually found this business in two different directions. So I found it originally through Baton, which is a like exclusive marketplace for businesses. They do a really good job of curating like good opportunities. Um, I saw that it was in Helena, which is about 90 minutes away, like an hour and a half away. Um, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And the numbers at first looked good. Checked my boxes, and then I asked a couple of my friends that I'd met here in Bozeman about that company. So people that worked in like the real estate world, and they were like, yeah, like they're down here, they're siding homes. Occasionally, they come to Bozeman. Um, so I reached out through Baton to the owner. Um, and we did an initial Zoom call. I think was supposed to last 30 minutes. It ended up lasting an hour and a half. Um, where I just kind of got to know Brock, who's the owner of it, and what are your motivations behind selling? Brock's not that much older than me; he's in his 40s, but like, what is motivating you to sell this business right now? Um, and then kind of like, what do you do every week? So like, those were the things that really mattered to me. Kind of going back to like a another thing that I wanted to change about my life when I moved to Montana was I would like to not work as much. So how can we avoid another thing where I'm going to be working like 100 hours a week? And I think for a lot of people, they hear that and they're like, well, you can't like have a business where you don't work all the time. And that's just simply not true. If you have a business that's growing, you will be working all the time. And if you have a business that's established, there's a chance the owner's only working like 5, 10 hours a week. That's us with no baked right now. So like we don't work all the time when it comes to no baked. And Megan puts in a lot of effort right now on the franchising end of things and supply chain. And so she's been putting in like, 30, 40 hour weeks. But if you look at like the core operation and like why do we make money and like what do we have to do, that might be like 3 hours a week of commitment, right? And like all of the work you're putting in is to grow. And so I talked to Brock at length about like, hey, so like what is it that you do every day? You know, when you wake up in the morning, how much do you focus on this? How much do you focus on your other business? That was the reason he was selling. So Brock has a home building company. He started that about 2 years ago, and you can even kind of see it in the financials of growth completely stopped, and he started focusing on the other thing. And he told me about the fact that he was like, well, I work like maybe 5 7 hours a week. I'm on the job sites a lot because like they're citing my homes, and I'm also in those neighborhoods, and so like, you know, I see the guys and I check in on the crews. And he was doing like some project management, interacting with the builders, like, doing a little bit of sales, nothing else. His team, and it was really really important to me to hear this. Like his team, the people working there who were younger than me, were running most of the company, and that was good news because that usually means, at least in my experience, like someone really has things systemized, even if it's not written down, even if it's a lot of tribal knowledge. There's a system. And he had an office manager. And she was keeping things organized. So at the end of the day, it's about as good as you're going to get with like a small business, right? You're not going to get like more systems than that.
Yeah. Yeah, nor, I think that's the opportunity to grow and put your own kind of fingerprint on the business as well. Like if it was all completely automated and systematized, you're probably going to pay a pretty good premium for that type of business versus, okay, there's something there to work with and improve and grow is where that opportunity comes in. So
Yeah, it's definitely where the money is too, right? Like you said, you're not going to pay as much of a premium for a business like that. We didn't. Um, and the main reason being is it's like there's a lot of risk. There aren't necessarily a lot of systems today. And, you know, it could go really, really well. It could also go relatively poorly, depending on like if you're able to retain the clients that are so important. I mean, really, if you look at what I bought a brand. I bought an experienced labor force who's really good at doing a specific trade. And then I guess I bought the relationships with the builders. And if those builders decided we're not going to use you anymore because Brock's not here, that would be a problem. So there is risk.
that's a huge risk for a business like that. Especially in the construction trades industries, there's a lot of relationship based transactions going on. How how if at all did you mitigate for that, and how why are
It's my main focus right now. Main focus of me and my business partner. So the first way we're mitigating that actually, and Brock helped us do this. So when Brock put the business up for sale about 12 months ago, he took Logan, who was one of his crew leaders, and he was like, hey man, you've been with me for 6 years. You're really good at your job. I'm going to teach you how to do everything. And then I'm going to push you to the front. So like when a builder has a question, they reach out to you and they don't reach out to me. Um, so what that inevitably did is over the last year, people have started to realize, well, Silver Creek delivers like a really, really good product, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the owner. And so Brock is still there for relationships. I'm still citing Brock's homes. He's still in Helena. He's still there in the community and still a big advocate of our brand. Um, but he's not the reason that we do good work. And I think showing builders that was really important. It's actually why we're accelerating the timeline of when we were going to promote Logan to be off the job site and start being like the face of the operations of the company in Helena. And then my partner and I are at the same time as like pushing on the Helena market and saying, okay, so Brock stopped being as aggressive because he was busy building homes. We need to go out and like reestablish these relationships and start asking people, so we do really good work, what's the whole hang up on us doing more for you? Like why aren't you using us for all of your jobs? They have incredibly high market share in Helena. It's a very small town, but they are building a lot of homes. So their market share is probably like 60%, maybe 70. So like most of the homes being sited are sited by them. All of the commercial jobs in that city are done by that company, my company. Um, so our next focus was like coming down to Bozeman and doing the exact same thing. People that aren't familiar with Western Montana, Bozeman and Big Sky and Belgrade are like blowing up. Like lots of money, lots of construction, lots of like $3, $4 million homes. And so our goal was to come down here and try to take Silver Creek's reputation, which Brock had also helped us with this right before the transaction closed. He had done 6 luxury homes in Bozeman. Um, he did it as a subcontractor for one of his old business partners, but it gave us a foothold here to where when I go out and do sales in Bozeman for the last 3 weeks, I could talk to a builder and be like, hey, so the Creekside development, we just did 6 homes over there. If you'd like to see some of our work, check it out. We're expanding to Big Sky and Bozeman. If you have projects coming up, let us bid them. And to just be very, very aggressive about making it a good relationship for the builders, but then at the same time, taking all the advice that Brock has given us, namely, get B plus work done and do it fast. Make sure your customers are happy, and make sure they don't have to talk to you. I think as soon as you like take the advice of the person that you're buying the business from and take it seriously, um, I hope it works out. I don't know yet. We could do an update episode in a year, and I'll tell you what went wrong. But for the first like month, the thing that's been really, really key for me at least is putting systems in place very quickly and then being very aggressive about the sales process because I was aware of the fact that those builders could leave. And so rather than letting them leave, let's be extremely aggressive and actually try to take more business. Just show them that we're very, very confident in what we're doing.
Yeah, that's good. It was good foresight from Brock to start putting Logan forefront if he knew he was going to be selling the business. But that still leaves a risk, like from a buyer's perspective, and I can hear my audience asking the same kind of thing. Well, what happens if Logan disappears? You're still in that
That's
risk. How do you kind of come to
that's the
grips with
main
that?
question the bank had, Tim.
Okay.
we had to take we had to take Logan's name out of everything because I was
Okay.
like, okay, so in reality, if we're being real, Logan's not leaving. And I've developed a good relationship with this kid. He's awesome. I've also promised him like money, glory, the whole nine. Uh, and he's a really motivated guy. So like he has no reason to leave. He likes working there. And I'm giving him more responsibility and more money. So you would think he would stay. But in the eyes of the bank, or the eyes of your audience, or anyone who's evaluating risk or a risk adverse person, they are going to say like, what happens if he leaves? And that is scary. You have to be ready for that. Like I said, it could go completely sideways. Like everything can go sideways at any time. Whether you lose a key employee, you lose a key account, um, you have like an insurance claim because something goes terribly wrong. A lot of risks, but there's a lot of risks with every business, and I think you have to be comfortable understanding what they are, and then just saying to yourself, "We will mitigate them, but we're not necessarily going to get rid of them because you can't." So when it comes to that, like I got very comfortable with it very early on, but I've also made it a goal to retain him and retain any other talent that we have. A lot of the guys have been there for a while. Ironically, one of them is quitting, and I don't know if it has to do with the transaction or not. Um, but at the same time, I talked to Logan about it, talked to some of the other members of the crews, and it's like, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to be fun. We'd love to keep this guy. He's our second crew leader, and he's very, very good at his job. But you can't force people to stay with you. And I learned that the hard way while running No Baked. Is really hard to retain good people. And if someone wants to leave, you cannot stop them going to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. People are always going to transition. It's always a risk when you're buying a business. You don't want it to happen too soon. But for the most part, employees like their jobs. They're going to stick around as long as you make them feel comfortable and seen and appreciated. They should stick around. There's, you know, And to those people that are looking at this and thinking this deal was way too risky, I would never do something like that. I always kind of encourage people to look at their own life and their own situation. And it's easy to identify the risks of doing something new, but it's often you kind of overlook the risks of your current situation. What are you risking by doing nothing? What are you risking by relying on your current corporate employer that might lay off 30% of the workforce tomorrow? So just kind of know that there's risks in everything. I think, like you said, there's always going to be risks. And when you buy a business or if you don't buy a business, so make sure you're evaluating
Having a
everything
job
carefully.
has to be the biggest single client risk in the world. Like having a normal job,
Yep.
like because you have one client and they 100% can let you go
Yeah.
at any
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I usually do caveat that for small businesses because we're, as small business owners, we're more reliant and appreciative of people, and we're not overinflating our workforce on a daily basis and then realizing it 2 years later of, oh wow, we hired 30,000 people too many for this job. We need
Yeah,
to
you're like, we may need to
right.
get rid of some of these people.
Yep.
And it's like,
Yep.
why'd you hire them in the first
Yep.
place?
Exactly. Uh, so you're a month into this. It's going well, but there's still obviously hiccups and potential risks and downfalls. You have growth plans, which is another thing that I tell everybody. If you're buying a business, you need to have a growth plan. It's don't buy a business just to keep it stagnant. So you're looking at other markets. Um, what you said you changed one system already. How much change are you trying to do in the first few months here?
Z- Um, so I don't want to change anything about the operation at all. I want to change everything about the things that the frontline guys didn't see. The only thing that I've asked them to change has been I implemented Slack. I was like, guys, I think we should all be on Slack. Mostly for like company announcements. It's just a big thing of mine, whether it be like no baked. Um, I have a small consulting agency where like all of us are technically part time. Um, Slack, really great for just not emailing each other 1,000 times and not having a bunch of group texts because that gets confusing and mixed in with your personal life. So, I implemented Slack for them and I was like, look, nothing's going to change. Just download the app on your phone. And, if we are like doing a company announcement or I want to buy you guys all a drink, I'll post it in there. Um,
It's a good
the
way to
other
get them
thing,
into it.
yeah, right. And then the only other two changes that we're making before the, this quarter is over, like this first 3 month period, just being way more aggressive about bidding jobs. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a change. It's more of like a bringing back what they were doing in the beginning, anyways. Being way more aggressive about like entering the Bozeman market. Um, we've bid some like really cool jobs just in the first like month through personal connections that me and my co-founder or me and my co-owner have. Um, and then we implemented a project management system, but that's mostly for visibility on my end, my co-owner, and then Logan, so that we can like actually track the projects that are happening. Um, Before they didn't necessarily have like a very good way of tracking workflow and like seeing the slowdown coming because Brock had been doing this for so long that he could see it coming without seeing it coming. Like he understood the ebb and flow. Ironically, everyone always wants to say they're like, oh, well, you're in Montana, the winter is probably slow. No, it's not. April is really slow because they pour foundations 3 months before siting a house or a commercial project. And so you can't really pour a foundation in like December, January, February, except for this last year because there was no winter. So you guys got a bunch of snow, but
You
we
could
got
have
none.
yeah, yeah, you could have gladly had ours. um, that's interesting. Yeah, people always assume different things about different industries until you get into it. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
What and change is tough on employees. That is one way that you can make sure you lose your employees when you first buy a business is try to implement way too much change too fast. What Jimmy's
People do
doing
not
with
like
the
change,
yeah,
man. They
yeah,
do not like it.
nope.
They get upset. I have a different way of paying people at No Baked than using QuickBooks anymore. And I signed up for QuickBooks to pay people because I was like, I that's how they're getting their paychecks right now. I do not want them to get confused or upset or scared. I want to be like, look, you got paid the same way you were paid before. Everything's fine. Um, Calming anxiety is really, really. There's other things too that I would have changed, but in order to prevent mutiny, I'm just like I'm rolling with it right now. One thing is, and this is literally against every core value I have. Brock was paying all his subcontractors on the 15th for the last 30 days of work. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to say, like, you did this work in May, and on June 15th, I'm giving you a check. And people get used to like the whole like easy money thing because see, we're not going to get paid for those projects by the time I paid you. I'll get paid a couple weeks later. And I just got done telling you how like I don't want to get into that situation again. So I think over the next like 2, 3 months, that will be the only other like big change that we make is like where were you guys leaking money and how can I prevent that from happening? We came into this deal with actually like a lot of cash left over. Um, and the way that we accomplished that's actually really interesting. But um, even if you have 100 grand, you don't need to light it all on fire. So I would prefer to fix those problems and get the thing cash flow positive every month. But yeah, it was interesting because like the month of takeover, um, I didn't. I mean, we were prepared to do it, but it's interesting that I will end up sinking like I don't know, call it like 50 grand into like working capital in the form of receivables because I paid someone before getting paid. Um, you do have to do that with your staff, like so making payroll, you have to do that. But with subcontractors, the margins aren't as good. So I was like, I want to avoid doing that with them. And if I have to float payroll, I will float payroll because it's that should be easy. And then, moving forward, as long as workflow doesn't get weird, you get paid for last month's jobs the next month and it's as much if not more than you needed. So I'm not that worried about it, but it has been interesting as far as like other things where I'm like that's a bad habit that now became culture. And if I was to say to like our roofing subcontractor who exclusively works for us, he should be an employee. It's another change that I'm going to attempt to make. But it's like, yeah, I'm probably going to say like, hey, if you guys want to keep being paid like this, you're going to have to work for me. No more of this 1099 shit. Um, on the flip side, like you could continue to be a subcontractor and I'm just going to change your pay schedule to be a normal pay schedule. Because if they were to work directly for the home builders that we're interacting with, that's how they would get paid. Generally, most of the builders, like you have to invoice them by the first for all the work you did the prior month. And then they pay you between like the 10th and the 15th. So like the pay schedules are fast. But like I think what people don't understand is that like that does end with a 40 to 45 day cash cycle for the subcontractor, which most people who are running a business should understand like that's just the way things are. But like you got to be careful about like your overhead in the interim and to your point that you said earlier, you do have to hold working capital at a certain point to make sure that you can deal with that. They get real big. I had a rule going into this, and I still have that rule because our goal after buying Silver Creek is to definitely do more acquisitions in the same space. Um, as you know, it's not as easy as saying I want to do more acquisitions in the same space. Got to find people who are willing to sell, and it's a whole thing in itself. But the rule was generally like I will not go above 4x like seller discretionary earnings. Because at this scale, when you're below like 2 million in EBITDA, you might as well look at that because that's a better number. Um, and so I wouldn't go over 4x. And then anything over under three was like attractive. I was like, that's awesome. So this was under three. Caveat, they had been growing really fast. So like if you were to go back to their 2021 numbers, it was like a 10x. So like there though again like there was inherent risk there. There was also like that's a really good signal. And they weren't pricing that in. They weren't pricing the growth in as something that like was causing the valuation to be higher because the growth actually had like tapered off. So like they grew really quick, like 21 to 2024, talking about like a 5x growth in revenue. And then it tapers off to where 24 to 25 is essentially flat. But again, like Brock is trying to sell the business. He's not in there anymore trying to grow it. In order to grow it, you'd have to take on like probably more working capital. Like, you'd have to, refrain from taking money from the business, hire some more guys, go get some more jobs, and most likely enter a new market. These are things that we're doing now, but um, that made it attractive for me because I believed, I ran the numbers a lot, but then I got down to like first principles, what drives revenue? And it's essentially houses. So you could say like the unit is a house. And yeah, how many houses do we need to decide per year to keep this thing going? How many homes are being built? Can we take some of that business? Are they already taking a lot of it? And is there a ceiling that I don't see that they're hitting right now? Definitely not hitting the ceiling. Um, definitely could do more. And you just kind of slowly ease your way into believing like this thing is going to just kind of continue as it is. Just knowing that there is risk that it could not. And I was real weird about doing the financial projections. I did them like 8 ways to Sunday. I took like his QuickBooks numbers, modeled those out with the loan payment, monthly numbers, which like honestly were terrible to look at. Because Brock was doing things like, I was like, every January you make a shit ton of money. He was like, oh, well, I wait to deposit checks. And I'm just kidding me, dude. Like, you made $300,000 last January. Like, how is
Yeah.
that possible? But it's like, yeah, and then I lost money the prior months because there was no revenue.
Yeah.
No revenue.
Yeah.
So like I was slowly getting myself comfortable with like workflow. What does the real cash flow look like? What are the actual strains on cash? Like what could come and like bite me in the ass? It turns out it's really just what we were talking about earlier, where it's like I gotta float wages or subcontractor costs where I'm like essentially floating wages and not getting paid yet. Like that's the only risk you really run. And after you've ran the business for long enough, because it is so profitable, that slowly becomes not a nothing burger, unless you were growing like a tech company. But that's not gonna happen. I think like we will quickly reach a plateau, probably in the next 3 years, just based on the fact that there's only so many homes being built in a place. Um, and you can only take so much market share, but there's definitely like a lot of room to run. Like I bought the business is around a $3 million a year operation. It probably could be a 10, $20 million a year operation just operating in like the Western Montana market. Especially it could be a 30, $40 million operation if we added on the other two large cities in Western Montana. Um, but yeah, it was like kind of wrapping my head around like does it seem as though this is going to collapse tomorrow? Or does it seem as though this is just like a well run machine? And you can only know that by putting your eyes on it and then really understanding what they do for a living. So, like, the numbers only tell you so much. The books only tell you so much. The books are really, really good for understanding like revenue and, like profitability and the unit economics. But then on the flip side, to understand where the revenue is coming from, like, have you gone onto a job site and looked at like how long it takes to hang siding and how much you're paying these people per hour, how much they're generating per hour with your eyes? Those were things that were really important to me. And then also to make a zero-based budget where I threw out all of his numbers. This was like a month before the acquisition closed. New zero-based budget. I throw everything out. Say like, here's what we're actually going to be spending. And I know this for a fact. And then like, here's how much we're going to pay on the loan. Here's how much revenue is likely. And so like those were totally different than like the historical financials, because in reality, like the past doesn't predict the future very well. Um, but once I had like, here's the backlog of jobs we have, here's your loan payment, here's the insurance quote that we just got, like all the big expenses for like a company like this, you can figure out pretty quickly like exactly what things are going to look like. Very similar to like no baked. If you want to understand a restaurant, I can tell you really quickly it's labor, rent, cost of food, labor, rent, cost of food, and then if you have a debt payment. If you understand these things and then you understand like the ebb and flow of like traffic into the restaurant, I can tell you how much money it's going to make. It's pretty simple. You just have to not be a clown.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting. I like that approach. I like the way that you analyze the numbers multiple different ways because that gives you a good perspective of worst case, best case scenarios and from different lens. Why, you mentioned you have a partner in this. Why did you go that route? And was that planned from the beginning of your search or how did that come about?
It wasn't planned from the beginning, and it's actually become a staple of everything I do over the last 12 months. And I guess it was a staple of everything I've done since I was 23. Um, Having a business partner is pretty awesome. Um, you can rely on them, lean on them, and you can split the ownership level tasks in half, which generally means like you get two people who are very invested. You don't have to pay them a lot of money, and they will work really hard at things that they're good at. And so I've made it a goal of mine to bring in partners. I didn't do this on purpose with Megan, but Megan is good at things that I'm not good at. And it's caused us to be very successful with No Baked. It also has given us way more bandwidth. And so in December, John, I had met him probably in June, and we talked about starting a different business together. Um, I was renting out this like school bus that I converted into an RV, and my friend was like, "You should talk to him," because I was telling him like, "Oh, this could be like a real thing. Like we make really good money." And John had worked at an RV rental company for 5 years. Ended up leaving. Prior to that, he was a Navy SEAL, and just a really interesting, like really driven, very friendly person, and really smart. And so like I had these great conversations with him about like renting RVs for months. And then the government shutdown happened because he actually was on orders in San Diego. He had quit the RV rental company because they wouldn't give him equity. And it was a startup, and he had been busting his ass to take them from 0 to 1 and did a really good job. It's a very thankless job. Um, and so he had left, and he had gone back into active duty with the SEALs. And then when the government shut down, he came back to Bozeman, and he was like, "Well, I guess I'm not working." Um, and because his contract was also over, so he was going to be in the reserves again. And I was like, "Well, you want to buy this business with me?" And he was hesitant, and then he was like, "I'm all in." And it ended up being a absolute godsend. Uh, John ended up helping me get that deal closed for a lot of different reasons. One of them was simply my credit profile was not like perfect after running Novik for so long. Most of the all the dings on my credit are from the pandemic. So, I could have waited a year. I didn't want to wait a year. So, like my credit was good enough to get an SBA loan, but then when they get into the underwriting process, they start getting like very like picky, especially with a loan of this size. And then with all of the risks that we both have pointed out so far. And so John's credit profile made them feel a lot more comfortable. And John also had access to a very interesting form of capital that we ended up using. They can, so when you're in the military, you can borrow from your retirement plan. Like you take out basically there, it's kind of like borrowing against a life insurance policy. And so we were like, okay, well, in this situation specifically, we just need to have the down payment money for about a week. And so he was like, well, we can just borrow it from my retirement plan. I was like, great idea. So we put up no money. So we borrowed it from his retirement plan, wired it to the lawyers. They wired us back 6 hours later. And then we put that money back in his retirement plan and moved on, which was really interesting. Something I had heard about people doing before. And again, like I went into this process. I guess the good thing is like I was surprised that some of that nonsense worked because at the end of the day, like you built something that's supposed to work a certain way cash flow wise, but then many of the times in real life it doesn't. You have situations all the time where it's like, yeah, on paper this is sounds great, but this isn't how it's going to happen. But for that specifically, and like figuring out the down payment and essentially buying the business for $0 out of our pocket, um, that apparently works. Apparently, you can do that. Uh, I will caveat that with like John and I put our own money into the bank account for the business, and we also borrowed a little bit of working capital. But like, you obviously have to have cash to run the company after you've bought it, and so that's why that was so important to us.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you spent some money on quality, like pre-closing stuff between attorneys and accountants and other stuff. Just on his loan, two questions. One, can is that only for active duty, or can people that are already out tap into that themselves? And
People
then,
who are in the reserves can. I don't know if you're out if you can tap into it like that. Um, I can't. I'm blanking on what it's called. It has a special name. Uh, Starts with the T.
okay,
And I
I'll
would
do some
recommend
digging on it.
people like, yeah, do some digging. But I honestly, it's kind of like when I'm helping people buy franchises from us and get their store open. It's like there are a lot of different ways to like fund your business, and the more people should probably be a little more creative around like, hey, here are all the options that you have, and if you're really willing to go all in on something, I'm not opposed to like someone using their 401k to start a business. Um, are you going to get better returns than like it being in the 401k? Probably. You're also going to work, so it's a little different. I wish people would caveat that more, where it's like, man, like these return profiles are so great. It's like, yeah, like if you have a business, like a real business, you definitely can make 100% on your money every year, but you're also trading your time, not just your capital, for like
Yep.
that sort of
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, it's not completely passive like leaving it in an S&P index. And do you, if that loan, like you guys put that money back pretty quickly, if you had needed that money for a longer period of time, is that also
Oh,
possible or?
yeah, so we borrowed it with a 5-year like loan agreement just to make sure like, hey, if we need to keep some of it out, we can. But the great thing is like you can like go back and borrow that money at any time. And I would I'm not like of the Dave Ramsey school of thought particularly, but there's no reason to pay interest on the money if you don't need it. Um Especially when you can just go back and access it again like a credit line. There's also the thought for me now, which is that like I want to stack up cash from like operating income, but I don't necessarily want to stack up cash from like debt. So like I won't necessarily pay off like debt that we have for like assets, but I also don't necessarily think that someone should like leave an open credit line if they have the cash to pay it off. It's like, dude, just pay it off, draw it again. They like that anyways. The bank will like you. That's a good thing.
Don't pay interest if you don't have to. And then just because you kind of touched you glossed over this quickly, but you wired the money to close on the business, and then you got a wire back. And you mentioned you technically bought the business with no cash really out of your pocket. How did that structure work? And maybe just kind of touch on the financing of the whole of the business overall.
Yeah, so now we're getting into why they were uncomfortable with my credit
Yeah.
profile.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Also probably uncomfortable with me because they knew what I was trying to do. Um, so you're not supposed to do this. I'm just gonna throw this out there. This is not what you're putting on paper. But I had in my head, I'll tell you what I had in my head and then what I told the bank. What I had in my head was okay, I can defer seller financing for 5% of the 10% equity injection. I can use seller financing in the SBA loan for the other 90%, which it is a blend of both. Make payments on that. Seller financing is usually a lower interest rate. So if someone will offer it, take it. And then I need to come up with 5% in cash. And then I said to myself, well, this debt payment is only like 25% of the free cash flow. A lot of SBA loans will go up to 100% if it's your business. Like if you want to get a 7A loan and you have a cash flowing business right now and you've been operating it for more than 2 years, they'll give you 100% of your cash flow. That can be an enormous loan. So I was like, look, I'll go for some working capital and I'll do it under the guise of, before I get to that, actually, so that's how I'm going to structure it. But in my mind, I'm going to get an SBA loan for more than the purchase price because that will allow me to service the debt easily, but also have no money into this thing, have money left over to actually run the thing when I'm done. Hopefully, I don't have to take money out of my pocket to do that. So the way I went to the bank and like proposed this is like we get their like proposal letter. I go back to them with like, well, would you be willing to entertain some working capital? They said, sure, write me a memo. So I wrote them up a very detailed memo and a financial plan detailing how I would use the money to create more jobs because the SBA likes to hear that. And that's really great advice, honestly, for anyone who's going after a 7A loan, even if you already own a business. Generally, like, I'm going to borrow this money. 7A loans are mostly for working capital. Then, when you know what you're going to use that working capital for, generally you say, like, growth, and this growth will result in more jobs because the reason I need the money is to pay for those jobs. So I went into it basically saying, like, hey, so we're going to open up in the Bozeman market. We're going to hire two new in-house crews. I'm going to hire an office manager. Here are all their salaries. Here are the costs associated with that. Here's exactly how it's going to help us grow the business. And also, when I have an in-house crew as opposed to a subcontracted crew, my margins are better. So I'm going to improve the overall gross margin of the business. That was kind of my argument. And then they came back to me with a much lower number than I asked for. And then when we got 2 weeks away from closing, they were like, all these numbers don't add up. Uh, the loan is too big. And I was like, well, would you like to give me the rest of it in working capital? And they were like, well, I'm not really supposed to do that. I was like, I'll write you a memo. And wrote up this thing that was like, hey, if you keep, like, we keep this money in, here's what we'll use it for. Just let me know if you'll approve it. And they approved it, which is great. Because honestly, the bank wants to lend you more money.
Yeah.
It's a dichotomy inside of a bank that I don't think a lot of people understand, which is that you have the deal makers on the customer facing side, and then you have the firewall, and then on the other side of the firewall, the underwriting team. And then if you have an SBA loan, then you also have the SBA. So like you have to make the underwriting team and the SBA happy. The guys at the front office of the bank, because they make commission, would love to lend you $500 million. So like if you can get these two groups to align, then everything works. And I think For us, it was like pulling teeth a lot of the times. It took a lot of convincing, a lot of getting on the phone, talking to people. But I think if you don't ask, you're never going to receive. So that's what we did.
Yeah. Yeah, the frontline people in the bank that you talk to are salespeople. They want to, they'll tell you everything that they can do for you, sometimes to your own detriment and their own detriment because the underwriters will block it completely. But they want to give you money. That's how banks make money. So ask for it, try to push it. When I closed down the
It's
wine and
also
liquor store,
guaranteed for them.
yeah, 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 the SBA is backing it up for them. So there's really no reason not to. That's when I closed on my business 13 years ago. We had extra, like we realized a couple days before closing, there was going to be a lot of extra cash. And they just kind of said, yeah, that's okay. Your debt service covers it. Keep it in your bank account as working capital. And,
Man, I wish
you
they
know,
would have done that for me,
yeah,
Tim. They
that's,
made me
I,
jump through hoops again.
yeah. And when I say a lot, it was a lot relative to the deal. It was not
Yeah.
a ton of cash. I mean, I was at a $350,000 purchase price. So, um, it was, and the inventory, the reason it was off was that the inventory came in a lot lower than we were anticipating. So it was supposed to be the right amount. It just, the inventory count was lower. So they didn't want to go back and redo everything and all the documents were ready at that point. So it
It
was just
was,
easier to
yeah.
close and not worry about it.
The closing process is the last thing that was like very complicated. I think I got some stuff re-signed like 18 times. And I was like, you've got to be shitting me, guys. Um,
Well,
one of the things, and this was like compliance from the bank, like their lawyers were reviewing some of the documents and they were like, so you guys docu-signed all these, that's amazing. But like the docu-sign signature is covering up some of the document. So we need you to go back and re-sign this. You signed this saying your name is Jimmy, your name is James. Can you go back and re-sign it as James? I'm like, yes. But yeah, me and the buyer and my business partner re-signed the purchase agreement to make the bank happy 8 times. We edited it and re-signed it 8 times. And everyone was like, I'll just keep signing it because we all like operationally and like the actual mechanics of the deal, nothing changed. Nothing changed at all. And so like Brock was like, give me my money. And I was like, yeah, same. Um, whatever we need to do to make you guys happy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is crazy. Signing documents for a bank just blows my mind. They make me sign as Timothy Delaney, Timothy T. Delaney, just on just to make sure that they've got everything covered. I don't even DocuSign anything for the bank because it just doesn't seem worth it. I guess it's not from your
Dude,
perspective.
I just started docu-signing stuff because I was like, this is the only way to get this done fast. I would send out all the docu-signs, we'd sign all of them, send it to the bank. Then the funny thing is I sent all those to the bank and they were like, we need the certificates. And I was like, those are on them. And they were like, well, we need them separate. So go back into DocuSign, download everything, be like, uncheck the document, and just like, I just need the certificates for all of these. And this is like 18 things to sign because you're signing like a lease and purchase agreement and non-compete and like all of this different stuff, two seller financing notes. Like, this is a lot of junk. But again, like I think jumping through those hoops and being very prepared for them is super important. And we had a really great deal maker on the SBA side who helped us kind of like get through the process in an intelligent way and also know like what not to say and what to say to the bank.
Yeah.
And I think that was really important.
How'd you find that person?
Keith found me. We became friends on LinkedIn probably a year ago. He's really well known in like the CPG, like food and beverage space. Keith at one point had his own like manufacturing company, went bankrupt, uh, started helping founders get debt. This is like back in 2015, or maybe prior to that. And then we met through mutual friends. It's like started following each other on LinkedIn, and we talked about a lot of different things over the years. And then when I went to do the acquisition, I was just like, I need to call Keith because we talked about doing an SBA loan for no baked, which I have an SBA loan at no baked, but just like a larger one. And then like I was doing some stuff to help founders out, and I would introduce him to Keith. And yeah, he was a guy that I knew personally, that like he does this stuff for a living. And that's the other thing is like I wouldn't have known what 8 banks to ask. Like Keith did that. I didn't. I put together deal memos and like a packet and gave it to him, and then he did his thing. And the bank pays him. We don't. And you're gonna end up paying the same amount of money anyways. So I recommend finding someone like that that knows what they're doing. Like they've been through the process before, like a couple times. Um, and just, working with them to get the deal done. And again, like Keith, like worked on it with us every step of the way. Like came up with solutions, got on the phone with the like portfolio manager at the bank, like was like, hey, like what do you guys need from us? Can we figure this out? I think he just gave us a lot of like advice that, you know, in the past I've learned a lot from the school of hard knocks, and I prefer to not do that again. So it's really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on earlier the fact that the banks didn't like that you didn't have industry experience. I didn't have industry experience when I bought the wine and liquor store. I mitigated that or convinced them that I was okay by writing up a very thorough business plan, which kind of sounds like your memos that you wrote for extra working capital.
I wrote them a business plan too. They were asking for it, and I was like, I'll give it to you. But I think you have to do everything you possibly can to convince the person on the other side of the table that this is a good idea. Because they have to convince their underwriting team. And even though I'm sure like the CEO of the bank, like a lot of people at the bank are like SBA program, hell yeah. 80% guarantee from the SBA. We can't lose. We make money. This is awesome. We'll repackage these loans and sell them. I don't even want to hold them on our balance sheet. So, like, from a business perspective, those banks should be handing out money like candy, but they don't, because if they do that and then they get a bunch of defaults, the SBA won't let them do it anymore. So they do have some incentive to not be insane, but like, um, you just got to convince them that it's a good idea. You have to help them help you because they're going to try to convince the SBA it's a good idea. Anyways,
Yeah. Um, this has been awesome. A lot of good information. Super happy for you that you got this business and closed on it.
thank you.
Awesome. Anything else you want to leave the listeners with about the process or any advice or any surprises or anything like that?
I will leave you guys with one last piece of advice, and it's you just really have to stay persistent. Like if you actually are dead set on like going finding a business to buy, doing the due diligence, it's going to take a long time to find the target. It's going to take a long time to do due diligence. You have to not be afraid to walk away. You got to start the process all the way over again. And then once you find the right target and get them under LOI, it might take 6 months, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. It is a process. It will take longer than you think, but it's worth it at the end. So, Jimmy, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming back again. Congrats on the new business, and look forward to having you back again another year for an update on how this one's going, or how
Oh yeah.
how
Thanks for having me
the
on, Tim.
future acquisitions go. Thanks.
Yes.
Everybody listening out there, if you're interested in buying a business and you're struggling with the mindset, the kind of confidence to get forward, I do have a new mastermind. Happy if you check out the website, powerofbiz.com, and schedule an appointment. I will talk to you all again soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to Business Buying for Financial Independence. If you're serious about owning your time and building long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.